a lot of people would think that this podcast gives a lot of seeds of information, so many seeds that it could fill its own vault one day. But maybe there's already a vault that holds all those seeds. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Top Podcast. I'm your host, Julian. Jordan, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing really well, man. Looking forward to making another podcast about something that's very, very interesting and has a lot of information behind it.
Today's podcast, kind of when I was researching, made me think of our podcast we did a little while ago about kind of zombies and doomsday scenarios. And I think this is a real life, greatly placed, great idea of a doomsday bunker that is housing all of food, all of the seeds for food for as long as we can remember.
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about is the Svalbard GLobal Seed Vault in Norway. And what this seed vault is basically the bank of all of the important plants that the world needs.
And that's something I never thought about. Every day I go to Chipotle or I make a sandwich at home and I just eat it and I consume it. But I never think about, the barley or the wheat or some of the seeds that were planted to make this food and how that's ever changing and our climate's changing. And the Svalbard essentially is housing up to 1 billion types of seeds that if for something were to go wrong on Earth, they'd be housed in this place and we could test out to see if these seeds would grow down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Just to put a number in your guys' head. So in the seed vault, in the Svalbard Seed Vault, there is 1,075,940 or 954 seed deposits currently, which takes up about 6,000 different species with 76 depositors. And those depositors even include like North Korea too. So there's a spot with, all of the countries together have their own seeds in this place.
This place, Svalbard, is located in Norway, which is roughly 800 miles from the North Pole. And I'm not joking when I'm saying that there are literally polar bears who are in sight distance roaming around this giant villainous looking vault. If you've seen it, it's just this kind of jetting metal structure that peeks out of the side of a mountain so that all of the ice on Earth were to melt, it still wouldn't come up to the entry doors of Svalbard or the GLobal Seed Vault to be protected in all scenarios and also stay always in permafrost.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Like, what an image. If you read it, or listeners can just imagine this ominous. It's almost like this elongated metal that's square that jets out of this mountain. And you have your moat of just polar bears and absolute frozenness. And that's where you keep all the important stuff and the master plan to take over the world. But Julian is correct in the fact of, this is a really interesting and smart spot to put a place that needs to be perfectly controlled and perfectly safe for a long, long amount of time. So this is basically in the permafrost, like Julian was saying, which means that basically permanently frozen Earth. So this Earth has, I think, the temperature of about -4 Celsius, and also it was made out of basically an old coal mine, and so it just goes deep into this mountainside and deep into the earth to get that proper temperature.
Some people call this the world's most important freezer because, essentially it is. It holds everything to, like Jordan said, -4 or 5 Celsius. And the vaults themselves are held at -18 Celsius. I think that's -0.4 degrees Fahrenheit, essentially so that this is where seeds be preserved for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the really cool thing about this, as we alluded to earlier, it's very similar to a bank, but everything in this freezer is public domain.
Yeah, which is really cool. So you can literally look up certain seed or certain genus of seed that is in the bank currently. And so I know that some of you guys are thinking like, oh, let me like ship, my seed into the vault. And I'll tell you what, that is not going to get a response from what I've done research on, just purely on the research side, boys.
And if you don't get what Jordan is hinting at here, he means they only take plant seed or food seeds. They don't take human sperm or eggs or embryos to be frozen in there. Someone might have tried to snuck some in, but they also don't take any seeds that are related to drugs. So, an example would be marijuana. And it's really an honor system because the people that work at Svalbard don't necessarily check the boxes. Like they don't go and open up other people's boxes. There's probably a vetting and, there's an honor system and it probably goes through a metal detector to make sure it's not a bomb. But it is pretty private, allowing, a lot of variety of seeds to come through and be placed in there.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of like the cool spot about it, being that it is this international hub for all of the rest of the world to put their seeds that they think are important. And so you have thousands of species of like maize or like chickpeas or like beans, lentils, things like that. And at the same time, you just assume what's in these things and just believe everyone's saying that really what's in there is what's in there. So it's kind of like this mystery thing of like, imagine at the end of the world, you go to Norway to get into the seed vault, you open up and you see that like North Korea was trolling and put in like some like Hot Pockets or something into their seed vault bank. So I find it like extremely interesting that it is the way that it's managed. It's almost like free form in a sense of it kind of runs itself and regulates itself in a way, not being able to check what's in these seed boxes.
The other thing too that I found interesting talking about large varieties of seeds is, for example, the Svalbard. There are many other similar seed vaults around the world, but the Svalbard itself holds over 200,000 varieties of rice. And the reason that there's 200,000 varieties of rice being held in the Svalbard is because down the road, say climate change heats things up quite a bit or something else occurs on Earth, is that, out of those 200,000 varieties of rice, not every single one is going to work the same when it comes out of that vault. So it's making sure, with technology that maybe they're splicing and modifying some of these varieties of seeds to make a variety of rice that is able to grow in the current conditions, which is very interesting and equally terrifying.
And not only is it just rice, that there is a massive amount of genuses and seed samples to take from, but there's also like you can think of, for instance, there's crops of potatoes, peanuts, Cajun beans, and all of these things, which is actually pretty interesting, are not genetically modified in any sense. So the difference in varietal and species comes from evolution in itself and not like a man-made rice seed or a man-made barley seed.
Yeah, I think it's super cool that they don't allow any genetically modified organisms or seeds into the vault just because, some of those GMO-based seeds probably take a little bit extra to grow. And the whole idea of this bank of seeds is making it as easy as possible, hopefully, for if something were to ever happen, that you could go in there and, take out of the domain and help start replenishing the earth if that's a viable solution at that point. But some of the cons about the Svalbard itself that people bring up is that this facility cost $9 million to build, and it cost millions of dollars to keep up yearly, essentially. And a lot of people have a problem with this because it's not being used, right? It's housing seeds, but at this point, there's no demand because we still have farmers. Climates are still livable and most areas are plantable, so that you're paying millions of dollars a year to keep this thing up, where no one really is accessing it often enough to validate that value.
That's an interesting take on it for sure, because I feel like it's like insurance in the sense of the presence of it there in an ideal world should never be used. There never should be a time when a certain seed that we find very important enough to store in this, this really secure facility will be wiped out, and we need to pull from that we saved and and to replant and restart this crop or whatever plant it is. So I think that it is a thing of necessity, in the fact that if you don't know what's going to happen, let's say that, or a huge fire wipes out a whole population of a specific species of, let's say, corn. Since we have that seed in the bank, it'll just be insurance. So I think, yeah, granted, it is an expensive thing to maintain, but I think it's also probably a smart thing too, in the aspect of, the world's unpredictable, right?
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that just because it's not being used doesn't mean it's valuable. I think it's about caring for what could happen down the road and what's happening in front of us right now in terms of climate change or overpopulation, or, soils are changing or being taken care of the same way. Or you could have something completely random happen, like all the unvaccinated children in the world bring measles back and we see another plague. No sleight of hand there. Besides from that rant, though, I think that's a valid thing, is we don't know what's going to happen 10, 20, 40 years down the line at the way things are progressing. That always going to be value in having that option to feed and replenish or start growing crops again for future societies can lean off of or work off of.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a case when it actually you can see this in action, and the fact of, it's not used a lot, but if it will be used, then that's a huge, huge thing to have, or a sense of confidence. So for instance, this actually was a scenario where the seed bank was used to fruition. So in Syria, basically there was a conflict and they lost a specific strain in their bank at Aleppo. And so there's seed banks all over the world. And so one was in Aleppo, and it was a strain of heat resistant wheat. And so what happened was that seed was destroyed. And so what did they do? They basically got that seed from the Svalbard seed bank to hold that population still present in the world, or else it would have ceased to exist. So there are cases where, this actually happens. It's not just a what if. And so that's why, you could see it in working order as far as if they didn't have a heat resistant wheat seed in Syria, they would literally be missing a huge portion of what they do.
And the thing to think about that is there's also repercussions. So if we look at this Syria case, it wasn't news that their high heat strain diminished. It was just, it kind of got replenished. They kept going on with their job. But think about in somewhere like America, where wheat is in so many products, that if you lose wheat, then maybe for a while and we didn't have these seeds, you'd have to find other places that have wheat. And then eventually they run out, and you kind of have this long chain effect where either the price of wheat is skyrocket, or you see some other things happen where people are monopolizing certain seeds so that, if someone does want it, they're going to pay that top price.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where we harbor what is important in the world, as far as, this might be a thing that we need in the future. So we'll always keep it as almost a public availability. And another thing too is we're not only looking at Svalbard. It's not like Norway just kind of was the mature brother of the world, kind of a large accumulation of seed vaults. So for instance, just going down the line of a few, there's Camino Verde in Massachusetts. That is also a seed vault. There's the Great Lakes Bioneers Chicago. It's a seed saving initiative, which is a clever name. Chicago, I see you. And also, there's tons of vaults out there. Even one in Hawaii, which is basically a Hawaii public seed initiative. So the world is kind of coordinating with itself to safekeep all of basically the genetic strains of plants that we find important and maintain them throughout the world so that there is kind of like a blanket insurance of like if something really horrible happens, we can at least restart with this seed that we kept.
And the nice thing about having multiple seed vaults is if for some reason someone wanted to attack one of these seed vaults and burn all the seeds or destroy them, one, when we look at Svalbard as an example, it is 120 meters deep in the permafrost, so everything around it is frozen from the doors, the pipes, the walls, the ground, and then it takes 5 secure doors and levels of authentication to get through. And it's buried in the side of a mountain. And then there's 3 vaults in there, and only one is currently being used. So then they'd have to find the right vault. But saying, one seed vault was attacked, you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. And that's why they try to kind of juggle different seeds, or if they see a certain variety of seed, or people sending these seeds aren't sending all their seeds just to one place. They're trying to place them in other areas so that if the worst case scenario happens, it's available in other areas.
Which I think is a very smart thing to do, in the fact of, like we said before, it's about making sure that we have this insurance. So we have insurance in the fact of making sure one seed vault isn't the only thing that we are holding on to. So, for instance, we do have a little bit of wiggle room in that sense. And also, we have insurance in the fact that it's super important. And so we put it in a very, very secure space as far as the Svalbard GLobal Seed Bank.
Yeah, and we hope you got a little seed of knowledge from this and understand that, at the end of the world, there's things being done out there to help the world continue on in some sort of way. And I mean, if you want to look for a picture of the Svalbard, it's Svalbard, Svalbard. It looks like it should be in a James Bond film. It's a super cool facility, and it's just really sweet to see this initiative to have that insurance for generations to come.
Exactly. I want to thank you guys for being great podcast fans and listeners. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one, because we'll be coming up with the next one soon.
Yeah, you guys can tune into our episode next week. If you're a fan of numbers, we're going to take a dive into some very interesting statistics. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and catch you next time.